House of the Dragon Season 1 finale dropped earlier this week, and it's about as crazy as you'd expect from the Game of Thrones prequel. The final episode of the first season has paved the way for a deadly road ahead. If you'd like to find out everything that happened, you're at the right place. In today's video, we'll discuss the finale and a lot more. So let's dive right in. First off, the finale has set the road for a deadly continuation. We always knew that since House of the Dragon was a Game of Thrones prequel, things wouldn't be all rainbows and sunshine. But the finale of the first season has surpassed all our expectations in regard to the sheer violence. And now it's clear that the gloves will be coming off in Season 2. The season's final episode started off in Dragonstone, with Princess Rhaenyra receiving word from Rhaenys that her father had passed away. Not only this, but Rhaenyra also found out that Alicent and Otto had usurped her throne and that Aegon II had been crowned the king. Receiving all this news wasn't easy, and it even caused her to go into early labor. But we saw throughout the episode that Rhaenyra, who was now rightfully the queen, was the only person trying to save the realm from plunging headlong into war. Though as we saw by the episode's conclusion, this kind side of the queen might be coming to an end. The season finale of the House of the Dragon ended with the shocking death of Viserys Targaryen, Rhaenyra's second-born son. And as she received the news, the dialogueless scene said only one thing: the Black Queen was going to show no mercy. While she might have hesitated to start the war before, losing Luke is seemingly going to be the thing that's going to start the Dance of the Dragons. Next, we should also explain how things got to this point. If you haven't caught up with the episode or are just looking for a recap, don't worry, we've got you covered. So, as we already mentioned, Rhaenys arrived at Dragonstone with somber news about the king's passing. As soon as he heard about what had happened, Daemon was ready to set everything to the torch and have every greenhead on a spike. Rhaenyra, though, had a completely different issue to deal with. She went into early labor and had to literally pull her stillborn child out of her as she screamed in pain. Outside her room was Daemon plotting the war against the Greens. We definitely think this calls back to the whole thing about how the pregnancy was described to be the woman's battlefield earlier in the show. The miscarriage is tough to watch. Even with the weirdly high amount of brutal birthing scenes the show has had in its first season, this one might have been the toughest one yet. All the warmongering stopped for a second as news about Rhaenyra's child being stillborn reached everyone. She personally wrapped up her deceased daughter for a proper Targaryen funeral. While it was already a pretty sad scene, Sir Eric arrived and made us all cry our eyes out. He had with him Viserys' old crown, which he'd stolen after the king's death. Daemon took the crown and placed it on top of Rhaenyra, declaring her to be the new queen. Plus, here's where things started heating up. While she might have just lost a child, the queen didn't plan on slowing down at all. Alongside her advisors, she discussed which houses may lend her support and what alliances they could hope to achieve. Daemon had a different idea, though. He believed that mere men wouldn't be what made a difference to their cause, not when they had the strongest weapon in existence: dragons. The Rogue Prince had done the math, and apparently Rhaenyra's side had about 13 of these winged monstrosities. That's a lot more than what the Greens had, and so naturally, Rhaenyra had much more power. The Rogue Prince suggested taking Harrenhal and then continuing all the way to King's Landing with just the dragons alone. But as they were creating their battle plans, Otto Hightower arrived at Dragonstone with an interesting message. The Hand of the King stood on one end of the bridge with Daemon and his men on the other end. This looked like a deliberate callback to their encounter from the second episode, except there was one notable difference. Rhaenyra wasn't on the side of Otto this time. As the queen parked her dragon at the exit, it was clear that she wasn't planning on treating her guests with too much kindness. Otto revealed that Aegon had been crowned king and shared his term. He wanted Rhaenyra to relinquish her claim, and she would be awarded Dragonstone for it if she did. Plus, everything would be forgiven too. Moving on, Rhaenyra and Daemon clashed in their approaches. Daemon was completely against the terms set by the Greens, but Rhaenyra remembered the friendship she once had with Alicent, especially after the memento that Otto presented to her. Instead of outright having Otto Hightower and his men on the spot, Rhaenyra agreed to take the night to consider their term. Later, the queen reminded her family that when dragons go to war, everything everything burns. She added that her duty to the realm goes beyond just becoming the queen, and that she didn't want to rule a kingdom of ash and bone. That's exactly what happened with Daenerys nearly 170 years later, and it's clear that Rhaenyra doesn't seem too keen on following down the road of her descendant. Daemon disagreed though, as Rhaenyra reminded him of Aegon's dream and the Azor Ahai prophecy. The rogue prince lost it and began choking the queen. Apparently, Viserys had never shared the prophecy with his brother, and Daemon had a hard time accepting this. Fans were definitely shocked to see Daemon choke the queen, but we'd like to remind everyone that this is the same guy who literally murdered his wife with a rock just a few episodes ago. Daemon mentioned that dreams didn't make the Targaryens kings, dragons did, and while he's not wrong, it's clear the dude has some serious anger issues he needs to deal with. Next, we got to see Lord Corlys, and he was as epic as ever. Lord Corlys had sustained an injury in the Stepstones. He had been brought to Dragonstone, and after he finally awoke, he got to learn of everything that had happened. This included his brother's murder, Viserys' death, and the whole situation with the Greens usurping the throne. No biggie, right? Corlys finally came to realize his thirst for legacy is what led to the death of so many of his loved ones. And while he was just about ready to stop, Rhaenys reminded him that it was too late. War was inevitable, and they needed to take a stand for their grandchildren. The Sea Snake offered his full support to Rhaenyra, which is massive considering just how many ships are under the Valyrian fleet. Plus, they decided that it'd be best to send Jace and Luke to neighboring houses to make sure that Rhaenyra had their support in the coming conflict. Jace flew to the north on Dragonback to ask for the support of House Arryn and House Stark. Young Luke was sent to Storm's End to discuss a potential alliance with Lord Bormund Baratheon. Before they flew away, the Queen made her sons promise that they wouldn't engage in a fight and that they were being sent as messengers only. Finally, here's where everything went wrong. As Luke arrived at Storm's End, he realized he wasn't the only dragon rider there. His uncle, Aemon Targaryen, had also already arrived a bit earlier. He'd made an offer to the Baratheon Lord, giving his hand in marriage to one of his daughters. In return, he asked that the Lord support the Greens in the war. Bormund agreed, especially considering Rhaenyra's side didn't really have much to offer, as Luke was already betrothed and couldn't marry one of the Lord's 4 daughters. The young prince began to take his leave, but Aemon still wanted revenge. He threw down his dagger and asked Luke to take out his eye, as payback for Luke having taken his eye back when they were kids. Luke tried to make his escape, but Aemon followed him out. This started a chase sequence that ultimately resulted in the two boys losing control of their dragons. Luke and his dragon, Caraxes, ended up being a quick meal for the mighty Vhagar. It's clear that Aemon didn't intend to kill the young prince, which is a change from what the books tell us. As he flew back to King's Landing, Aemon had a look of shock on his face. He realized just what he'd done. There was no going back from this, and it's clear that the two sides would clash because of this horrible tragedy. Rhaenyra received news of her son's death, and all she had was hatred and anger on her face, and that's basically where the episode ends. It's been quite a long, wild ride, hasn't it? But the fun is just about to begin. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on the deadly future that's awaiting the characters of House of the Dragon? Comment below, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.